This is, it's commonly referred to as the Swiss Army knife of technology. There is literally boundless and unlimited opportunities to apply this to myriad use cases.
The very first guest that I had on the podcast brought this idea of like data fortresses and how organizations are going to become increasingly protective over their own data sets because they don't want their information to be used to power other people's revenue gain.
If you have buy-ins from all stakeholders, that is believing in the AI and other strategies is critical to success in your defined use cases.
Hey, Rob. Hey, Deniz. Welcome to the Power of People Building podcast. Great to have you on the show.
You too, Sam. Great to be here.
Hi, Sam. Nice to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. And for those listeners and watchers who don't know who you are, it'd be great to just get a brief introduction as to who you are and what you do within your organization. So, Rob, let's start with yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So both Deniz and I are from PwC, the professional services organization. We've got about 400,000 staff around the world in about 160 countries. We both are based in the UK. My role is the technology impact leader for the UK firm, and most of my work is focused upon bringing together the power of cloud, data, and AI to solve some of our clients' hardest problems in business, but in a way that builds trust and drives innovation responsibly.
Wonderful. Deniz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deniz, staying in the risk line of service in PwC and mainly working for the AI trust, risk and validation and assurance projects and trying to unlock the key of trust for scaling AI for large organizations.
Wonderful. And I think, this is so important, right? I think we as a society, we as an industry need to be talking about generative AI and AI every day. This is the most pivotal moment in tech history, in working memory and in living memory since the internet itself came to the fore. So it's something which we need to keep talking about. And I don't want to stop that echo chamber, but certainly today and what listeners can expect is some practical examples of how to actually apply generative AI within your organizations and thinking about the infrastructure considerations and ethical considerations and data considerations that can actually make it happen. And I think that's the second most important part when we're thinking about AI right at the moment is actually how do we do something with it? There's still a huge education piece, but yeah, practical steps are there. And Rob, we've been speaking for a number of years, and I know you've got a kind of storied background in this space before it was in vogue, let's say. So yeah, let's dial back a little bit, look back and look forward. It'd be great to get your kind of overview and perspective on all things AI.
Yeah, sure thing, Sam. And as I said, I've been around the space the best part of a decade, and often joke it felt like I was wheeled out as the party act at the end of conferences in years gone by. Let's bring out the guy to talk about the future. And truthfully, there wasn't much cut through after the big buzz of the various hype curves we've been through in the last decade. But the last 18 months have changed all that. We've seen, off the back of the advent of generative AI, a groundswell of awareness, growth, and planned adoption of this technology. And for me, I think this inflection point has come because really we're starting to move these concepts out of quite academic, hypothetical, and ethereal applications that's really the sole preserve of data scientists and engineers through to everyday life. I think about this, the majority of people have probably got something to do with this in their mobile phones. And the moment really sort of came home to me last year when I actually did a piece on Radio 5 Live Breakfast, and they asked me, Rob, are you adopting this tech in your life outside of work? And I just raised the story about how my 7-year-old daughter, she's 8 now, has been using this stuff to help generate bedtime stories because mine are clearly so bad. And what then unfolded was this live primetime debate around whether this is being seen as a productivity hack for a busy dad or an ethical dereliction of my duty as parent around fulfilling my parental duties. So it's kind of cut through when you get that consumer, society and citizen-led engagement around the topic. And we've certainly seen a lot of that in the last 18 months. So broadly speaking, it's an enterprise and business layer. Ambitions and plans are growing massively. We're seeing significant experimentation of this technology. We're seeing some bold commitments around investment. We probably still are at the foothills, though, of operationalizing this, of scaling this of putting this into practice across the breadth of your organization. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the barriers and opportunities over the course of this conversation, Sam.
Yeah, awesome. And I think, maybe the dereliction of your duties might have been subdued a bit if your daughter wasn't putting the prompts in. If you were at least doing the prompts, you could still argue, hey, these are my stories. It's my creativity that's gone into it. And I've seen something similar. An old colleague of mine not only did that, but he went to the nth degree of then creating the images on Midjourney to then accompany the text, to take you through. And now, of course, you could probably run it with a video with an overlay of, a voiceover from somebody famous to make it happen. So I think interesting on the personal stuff. And I think that's the bit really, even in your professional life, you're using tools every single day that are probably adopting this technology and thinking more broadly when we have the rollout into Microsoft, when we have the rollout into the Google suite, and it's in every single part of the system which you're using on a daily basis, well, it's inescapable. It's then, I suppose, with your own company's first party data, with your own company's, setup, how do you then bring that in to make something that's more bespoke and focused and targeted? So I don't know who want to takes that part. It's not a question at that point. I suppose the question is, what are some of the things which you need to set up? What's the foundations to make it work first and foremost within an organization?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll just start on some of the sort of core ingredients and then pass to Deniz just for some of the technical applications of how we need to think about this. I think it's fair to say, first of all, that there's still quite a long way to go for organizations to move fully all into the cloud. We launched a survey a few months back looking at about 2,200 organizations across the EMEA region. We found that only 16% of organizations could say that they're all in on cloud across every single business function. And there's still appetite to see like that be adopted within the space of the next 2 years. And investment is going in. But until you've got your cloud transformation journey nicely matured, until you've got your data strategy well geared up, and also thinking about some of the raw ingredients around workforce capability, C-suite buy-in, and a clear alignment of this strategy alongside your broader enterprise strategy, there is a risk that you can't fulfill the opportunity, you can't exploit the benefits proffered by this technology. Moving on to that, clearly there's a lot of very, very specific risk-based issues that organizations are going to face, which Deniz specializes in. So Deniz, if you want to build on some of these considerations, maybe to start things off.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, Rob. As a firm, as a company, you cannot adopt the Gen AI for all your use cases at once. So you need to be aware of the data, you need to be aware of the priority use cases, and actually you need to be aware of how your people are ready to be able to use this. So from the technical perspective, you need to assess that whether your data is ready to implement any Gen AI, whether you have the correct technology or from the alternatives, the technology chosen fits with your current DNA. And then you start to experiment like we did internally, actually. And then after this experimentation phase, you need to go and check what you need to put all this experimentation into production. Whether you have the proper security configurations, whether you have the proper governance structure for all the data model and the production environments, whether you have the team structures that is responsible from the securities and the developments and all other monitoring points. So it is a holistic requirement, actually, just to be aware before setting up any technology infrastructure into your domain.
Yeah, and I think that point of experimentation is key, because there's also this, I think it's almost a naivety that by using generative AI, by using large language models, it's instantly going to be better than the solution that you were using before, and that might not be the case. So is there anything kind of practically you can think about when experimenting, how to almost validate that there's something that's leading to progress?
Yeah,
you go first, Deniz, and I'll build on it.
Yeah, actually, to be able to test the generative AI that you are using for your experimented test case, there are a couple of pillars or risks that you need to be aware. I think these are all around aligned in the responsible AI frameworks coming from different regulations, but all are mainly looking for transparency, mainly looking for unbiased solutions, mainly looking for the security guardrails or the security considerations from the developers and the implementers.
Awesome. And Rob, did you want to build on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this from a people perspective, Sam. And this is, it's commonly referred to as the Swiss Army knife of technology. There is literally boundless and unlimited opportunities to apply this to myriad use cases. But you don't really get anywhere unless you've got widespread adoption. And a key part of this, I think, is around sentiment of the workforce around using these tools. So I guess away from the technical side of things, there's also that kind of organizational psychology approach as well, change management and some of that good hygiene there. To give you an idea of when we kicked off our own approach to adopting this internally, we made it very clear that the technology is not being kind of delivered to you, it's going to be co-created by you in the workforce. And I think I recall within a matter of weeks of opening up the opportunity to contribute to the ideation phase, we'd, I think, received well in excess of 600 submissions of interesting problems to apply this tech to. This is really powerful because you're really opening up the opportunity to innovate to anyone in the organization. It's not being done in an ivory tower in the CTO office, for example. It's really democratized, it's inclusive, and therefore it's much more likely to stick if the problem is being addressed at the shop floor, if that makes sense. So that was really powerful to kind of democratize access to this. The use cases now in the probably thousands. We've got a working group of probably 7,000 people working on these across the globe now. So the scale of the impact is huge because just for us as an organization with that many people working with data, working in myriad parts of the market, we have to get this right. We have to adopt this at the right pace, responsibly, and we have to make sure that we are thinking about how we take the workforce on that journey. And it's not simply a case of, is that a good problem to solve? There's much more to it to get it done well.
And the scale that you're operating at there is immense. And sorry, Deniz, you were going to jump in there.
No, I was just saying that maybe it's just to keep in the focus that this technology is not replacing any of your human force. It is just there to support your human. So I think in the key of our strategy, it was just said that it is human-led but tech-powered. So human involvement in the process is not just overpassed, it is just strength for the use of technology. So maybe it can be a key for the adoption and for the buy-in by the people. And
it should be accelerating. It's no surprise that you got 600 submissions instantly of people that said, hey, I've got a problem you can help me solve. Everybody's got things that are at various levels within their to-do list, within their organization, whether that's their own personal workload, the kind of ambitions of their team, the ambitions of their client that may be pushed further and further down the roadmap. And it's just accelerated the pace at which you can get to these. And we're feeling that with our development team at HackerJob. We're able to roll out new products at a pace that we just would never have been able to do before. And so, yeah, I think that's so important. And it's definitely still a human-powered endeavor. Certainly for now, at least in many things, and it will always have some element of creativity and application because there's those connective dots that are just so hard to reach. And I think the other part for human in the loop and that, I suppose, ethical responsibility question, that's a real part that we need to explore. I think from my perspective, I've started to see in master service agreements, there'll be an addendum to a contract that would never have been there before that asks some very simple questions, ask some very, very simple questions on AI. And it will say, hey, are you using this within your product set at the moment, etc. And it will be probably 50 lines versus a part on, GDPR, which might be 25 pages long for you to review. And I think that part's going to change. There's going to be a lot more litigation around it. There's going to be a lot more literature. From your side, and again, kind of practical advice for people, when applying generative AI in particular, where we're using large data sets and allowing information to be generated. And there's been a number of kind of well-trodden stories of where that's gone wrong. Yeah, what's the kind of guidance for people watching for, doing this responsibly and doing this ethically?
And maybe I'll just kick off first of all with the human factors, Sam, as well, because I think this is a wonderful opportunity to think about the very essence of what a technology team actually comprises. And I think we've now gone from this phase where this technology is in the hands of everybody. Now, for me, I spend as much time with boards of directors, HR directors, procurement people, CFOs, as well as I would with CIO and CTO office staff. So really it is cross-cutting functions. And I think this is part of the answer, is making sure that the interdisciplinarity of the teams building this is really well thought through. I think back to big projects we've done in the past using things like biometric data, which is super sensitive data. Of course, as Deniz pointed out, you need the security, you need the right approach to regulation, GDPR compliance. But there is something about having the right domain expertise in the room to ask the hard questions. In the case of this project we did around well-being, around biometric and cognitive data, we had HR domain experts in the room, we had regulatory lawyers. We've got a team of data ethicists. We've got a team of human performance experts in the room before the technology is applied. And I think that human factor is a core guideline we would look around, having that diversity of team, first of all. Deniz, do you want to build on that at all?
Yeah, actually, very specific to bias perspective, maybe we can say that the source of bias is very key for finding the correct method to identify it from the technical perspective. So having the domain expertise, having the ethicist in the team is key to identify the source of bias first, and then finding the correct technical methods, algorithms, statistics, and then find the correct method to mitigate all these possible source of biases comes as a second priority. But maybe because of that, always needs human in this loop. And we always need this expertise in our even technical processes and the tests leading.
Yeah. And I think there's also another level of, you could even argue, Sam, around being able to create competitive advantage around the quality of your tech product. Yes, you can assure it's secure. Yes, you can make sure it's regulatory compliant. You can make sure it's safe and solid piece of tech. But I think increasingly, a lot of these different disciplinary teams are able to ask a question around things like, what if? Should we consciously think about what might happen downstream? Which, if you think about this concept of consequence scanning, it's a really interesting field in its own right. And therefore, I think one of the conscious decisions that I think organizations are making around adoption of this tech is, should we be first to lead? Should we be fast followers? Should we build or buy? And then when it comes to some of the regulatory aspects or, best practice, should we just go with what's off the shelf around some of the, the ethical frameworks? Or do we go one step further and really craft and create the ones that are pertinent to our stakeholders, our customers, and our broader workforce at large? To the point this does put us in an advantageous position around building trust. And what's really interesting now is this increasingly is really being seen as part of the broader ESG agenda. So the interest we're getting now from boards of directors around this is really growing quite rapidly at the moment.
Yeah, and so that consequence scanning, could you elaborate on what that is? Because it's a phrase I've not heard before, and I'm imagining there'll be many people that haven't heard that kind of terminology. What does it mean in layman's terms?
Yeah, so I mean, there's some brilliant academic and civil society organizations that have been at the sort of genesis of this kind of thing. I was thinking about organizations like Everyone that Martha Fox used to run. I'm thinking about just, apart from having sort of met the minimum requirements around making sure a project is compliant and secure, you are actively thinking through what might happen if you're applying the use case here in this domain with these data sets, with these as the stakeholders and beneficiaries. What could the upside be? But also, can you in a structured way, model what the downside risk of it going wrong might be, and looking, to leave no stone unturned in that process, to build that in consciously as part of your product design and roadmap. And this is increasingly, I think, what you might see would have been useful across this litany of stories in the last 10 years where AI has led to poor outcomes, in particular in the sort of the hiring space, which is super interesting, around it leading to biased outcomes. And I think this thoughtfulness, this ability to ask hard questions that are above and beyond what you might put in the technology risk bucket that Deniz and colleagues would deliver as a professional service, this takes it deeply into social science and philosophy, and deeply into technology ethics, right into that societal impact lens, with a kind of structured framework of how you go about testing out some of those downstream risks.
Deniz, I'm going to ask you a question. I thought you were just about to build there, but I do have a question which is really like, on a technical perspective, what would be good guidance? So you're building this in at the start and you're thinking about risks that might come across in the future. What would be good guidance in terms of a cadence for reviewing this? What would be a process that people could follow to make it stick?
That's a great question, Sam. Actually, maybe it can be good to start with what is the weaknesses of your organization in terms of the legal risk, in terms of the ethical risks, in terms of the data security or the IP risks. And based on your weakness points, you should be able to take the position. You should prioritize your down points to solve. For example, if you are open for any model leakages or IP leakages, you should have a well-structured teams. We are generally saying them red teams or the other teams that works for hacking your model ethically and defines your weakness points and get the actions to correct them and to make it not as open as the previously to the other risks. I think it starts with identifying your major weakness points, go with them and solve it and take the actions and monitor it from the technical perspective.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, what it's really drawing my conclusion to, and the way that I'm thinking about this is, often, new technology comes to the fore and there is a lot of nervousness around people's positions, about the existence of certain jobs. And there's absolutely no doubt that, just from this conversation, when we're thinking about just, small part, important, critical parts, but smaller parts of the wider rollout, when you're thinking about volumes of people involved, they're critical new positions when we're thinking about the penetration testing, when we're thinking about the ethics, when we're thinking about the setup and how a team should be structured, and different, kind of viewpoints in there that might not have been in technical or product teams before, that are thinking about societal impact, PR risk, IP risk. How many times would you be thinking about that from a pure software development product play setup? It would be less frequent than it would be with the advent of AI. So yeah, very interesting on that point. And IP was one point there that you touched on, and I think that's a really fascinating thing to think about here. So the very first guest that I had on the podcast brought this idea of like data fortresses, and how organizations are going to become increasingly protective over their own data sets because they don't want their information to be used to power other people's revenue gain. And obviously there's a few cases rumbling through at the moment that will no doubt take many, many years to come to a close. And then there's big statements from YouTube CEO saying you're not going to be able to use our video to train your models, etc. So IP, data ownership, is not a question, it's a statement. I'd love to get both of your views. Deniz, why don't we start with you from a technical perspective?
It is, as the traditional statistical models, AI is starting with the data. So if you have a good data to train that model, you will have a great model. But if you don't have that data, you will not be having a great outcomes with the good performances. So data is the critical, but if you are even using the on-the-shelf models, third-party models, and checking the performances for all these models, you will require your own data that either to fine-tune your model or just to put additional technical structures to be able to make it more tailored to your use case. But if you don't want to share your data with the others, which is the most common sense, that you need to build secure environments to be able to further train these models for your use cases, your company. And then this will be a solution to not share your data with the other parties using the similar models from the technical perspective.
Yeah, awesome. Rob, I'm going to flip it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much I can build on that really, apart from really making this clear that this is now not a nice to have, but a fundamental responsibility of your entire board and exco to be cognizant of this when you are bringing in third-party vendors, when you are rolling these tools out. And again, it sort of doubles down on this need that unfortunately we still have a situation where digital savvy at leadership level is still too poor. There's significant upskilling required at the top of the pyramid. And interestingly, this is sort of inverted in some ways. Some of the people at the junior end and entry point into the organization probably have much more digital native skills to be able to be mindful and cognizant of some of these risks and opportunities. To the point where some of this opportunity can be solved by reverse tech mentoring, something we've looked at quite a bit in the past. But I would be saying that for all the investment considerations, for all the security and compliance and guardrails and various other considerations that build into doing this well, having your board on point, upskilled, active and contributing, I think is a critical success measure now, and not simply what might have been the case 10 years ago, where you might have a curiosity level at that level. I think this is swinging right back central to being on their risk register. And it's not just about holding back organizations from the brink, but if anything, boards increasingly will be wanting to hold their exco to account to understand if they're pushing hard enough, if there's a risk of being disintermediated or left behind. So, we talk a lot about this sort of Goldilocks level of adoption and innovation, where you're moving just fast enough to stay ahead of the pack, but not so fast that you're potentially exposing yourself to that litany of risks that you've outlined in your question.
Yeah, and I think there's the other part as well. The other risk here is also the risk of your investment, right? C-suite are looking at this and they're thinking, wow, this new tool is here. Companies in embracing it are seeing exponential revenue growth. We want to do the same thing. But right at the top of the conversation, we were talking about the structure and the foundation that needs to be in place to make it effective and to make it happen. And if only 16% of organizations are, moved entirely to the cloud and have that data available to them, they have the infrastructure, they have the change management, you might have the executive buy-in, but you don't have all the other component parts, the other ingredients, as you put it, to make it happen. And there's almost, I suppose, a risk there of investing in the talent. We see it on our side on HackerJob. It is the most in-demand skill set, the fastest growing, of course, of any technical professional. But if people are just putting people in who have those skills into their organizations and the setting's not right, then you're not going to be able to capitalize. Like, do you see, how much would you weigh that risk? Do you buy into that at the same extent, or would you still see value of bringing the talent in and challenging thinking and experimenting, even if everything's not perfect?
I think there's a conscious choice to be made around the proportion of upskilling existing staff versus buying in talent as part of this kind of sliding scale of where you are on the sort of the adoption continuum. And there's no right or wrong answer here, by the way. We've got a combination of buying in those skills as well as upskilling the broader workforce at large. I do think, though, that the way that you iterate, you evolve your strategy around this is critical. I think too many people are looking at their current business model, looking at how this can be the salvation to an array of productivity hindrances, inefficiencies. How do they drive the bottom line more effectively? When actually, not only is there a huge opportunity around growth, around the agenda of this, but a reinvention of the fundamental business model in its entirety, I think, is now within gift of this. So for organizations simply looking at this in quite a monocular view around how do you drive some efficiency improvement, are going to miss the bigger opportunity here that comes through around thinking about the organization 10 years down the track, 15 years down the track around where it can be in that time, rather than driving a few percentage points to the bottom line. And sometimes some of the external staff you bring in can help with some of that ideation challenge that's maybe upskilling staff internally might not always bring to the party around challenge. So I think, consciously where you place your chips on these thousands of use cases is really important around that investment question. And also thinking about ROI is another consideration around how are you measuring the effect of this? Is it a defensive play? Is it an efficiency play? Or is this setting your organization on a path to viability in the future through a reinvention process? Are all considerations to take on board.
Awesome. I didn't know if you wanted to add there from a technical perspective. I'm going to close things slightly here, but at the same time, open them up. And what I'd love is almost like a rundown of a checklist. And I'm talking very high level of like what people should consider right from the inception. So I don't know, place myself in an organization's shoes. We're an enterprise organization. We're, midway through a digital transformation. This new, shiny, all-encompassing technology has now come to the fore. And, I'm a CTO and I'm being tasked by my organization to, make sure that we're adopting this at the fast pace, at the right pace, the Goldilocks pace, to get things done from both a people and a technical perspective. If there was like a checklist that we could run through at a high level, what would that look like? I don't know who wants to start there.
Maybe I'll kick off from the sort of top end. I mean, I think first things first, like, a clear strategy. I don't think it's a separate AI strategy. It's aligning your AI strategy with your main corporate strategy. Buy-in across the board and the ExCo. And in doing so, the digital upskilling of both parts of that governance structure. I think you're looking at the maturity of your cloud transformation journey with your hyperscaler relationships, what is available already in the stack. I'm thinking clearly which these will build on is around the data strategy. And then I'm thinking about your strategic workforce planning, consciously thinking about buying in talent, upskilling, thinking about modeling further ahead, so that what if scenario planning, and making sure that you're also clear on use case identification, the sort of triaging of those incoming use cases to a point where you can categorize and cluster them so that you're not duplicating. You've got a clear portfolio where you can sort of flip things in and out, in a quite agile manner. So I think there's some sort of corporate-wide considerations to get right here. I would also say, just to finish off something else, is how you communicate this both to your customer base and your staff is critical, because I worry sometimes that we kind of we sort of wash the topic with too much pure positivity. The fact remains that big change is going to come. Now, we don't think that this leads to strong negativity in terms of job displacement, but we're pretty sure that job augmentation comes through very thick and fast, and therefore a kind of a reorchestration of roles as they stand is going to happen. And therefore, you've got to be quite clear and bold in your comms to say that we were going to upskill you, we're going to take you on a journey. It's up to you to lean in as a member of staff, though, to kind of, to think about the future that you're able to have here, because the upside on how it improves your job and your career could be huge. But status quo will not. Thinking about a really crisp, coherent, and focused approach to internal comms and comms to your customer base is very important as well, I think. Denise?
I think just a small thing to add on top of all you said, great Rob. It is key to have an AI strategy aligning with the corporate strategy is very much important, because if you have buy-ins from all stakeholders that is believing in the AI and other strategies, is critical to success in your defined use cases. And also here, considering the limited budget, you should be prioritizing your use cases based on the expectations from the different teams. And this should also be aligned with the HR strategies, tech strategies, data strategies, and ethical legal strategies in overall. So it is key to have a overall aligned strategy and get the buy-ins from all stakeholders.
Yeah, it's a great point. And then, the other part that then underpins that is then within your HR strategy. Well, that's the acquisition of talent, that's the development of talent. And if you want to tackle, 50 problems over the next 18 months or 2 years, whatever the time frame is, well, we're not going to be able to do all of those at once. How can we prioritize them? And then in turn, what are the people we need to deliver? And I think the other point there, I said I'd close it up, but also open it up, and it did open. Yeah, we've got a great checklist there. That would be an awesome soundbite. The other part there is then that consideration of like augmentation. And there was a great example, a TED talk that I still look back on now, Hans Göring and the magic washing machine. And it was this, the change in the number of female novelists, technologists, entrepreneurs, inventors, etc. That came about after the advent of the washing machine, a traditional, kind of very female heavy work, particularly in, economies with lower per capita earnings, where it would be many, many hours of the day was spent hand washing, and how the washing machine then changed it. And I always thought that was a great example. Another great example, the printing press, right? The internet just enable people to work faster and get things out there and raise voices that were perhaps otherwise unheard. I think that's my kind of rallying cry on this, is that augmentation should enable us to do more. It should enable us to solve more of society's problems, and hopefully, maybe do so with less working hours. We used to work 7 days a week. We now work 5 days a week. People are now working flexible time, 4 days a week, etc. So I don't know what your personal opinions are on like how this changes, I suppose, our interaction with work and our volume of activity.
Yeah.
And input.
Well, I think that's optimistic, and I am an optimist on this. I'm a responsible optimist, Sam. I like to think that this really can improve work for the better, creating good work. I think there is a lot of risk, and there's a lot of drudgery in various categories of work that can be augmented by this tech. So overall, I think it can focus in on tasks that have got much greater reward and cognitive value. So that should be within our gift. I don't think it happens by default. I think you have to work really hard on focusing in on making sure that people's work improves as a result of that, not just letting this run riot. As for the liberation of time, I think our economists might be more skeptical about simply thinking about this as the advent of the 3 or 4 day working week. More recently, it's tended to see us work harder than ever in that 5-year cycle. So that side of it, I'm not quite convinced yet. I like it, but I'm not quite there with it.
Well, it's going to go one of two ways, right? It's either going to make us just as busy as we are now, but with a higher task volume, or, name me somebody working in knowledge work that says, hey, I've got enough time to do my role. And I never, ever come to the end of the week with still things left to do. It's potentially a way of solving that challenge, and maybe just giving us our weekends clear, or, not having to delve in an evening. But that's, eternal optimist view. But ultimately, it should enable us to all move forward a little bit. But no, it's been absolutely awesome having you both on, and I think I would say what many listeners are probably thinking, which is to have both the kind of people and technical input throughout, and balanced kind of viewpoints was really, really powerful. So thank you both so much for kind of contributing. Final question, just to round things out on. If you could recommend something to read or watch on this subject that you're finding really kind of empowering or engrossing at the moment, what would it be? Rob, let's start with you.
A bit of a kind of a corporate plug, but we have just recently sponsored the main TED Talks taking place in Vancouver, which has just recently finished. So we were made corporate sponsor of that. There was a flurry of some fantastic talks there. I think one of them from Mustafa Suleyman was quite impressive. He's just joined Microsoft. Check out the latest batch of AI talks at TED that's just recently taken place.
Nice. And Deniz?
And for the technical learners, developers, I can say that there is plenty of free learning courses out there, but I found the deep learning AI's ones as the most useful and very hands-on experience ones. So I can recommend to start experimenting how they can develop that kind of technologies via watching them trying to experiment by themselves. it can be a great starting point.
Wonderful. Always love to think about some recommendations, and some brilliant ones there. So thank you both for joining. Awesome
Thanks,
show.
Sam.
Thanks, Sam.